interested in seeing it. And can you just keep an eye open, please, to me? If I put my hand to my ear, it means I can't hear you, and perhaps you've inadvertently switched off your microphone. So if you're trying to talk to us and I do that, please check your microphone's on. Right. Sharon, was there anything else you wanted me to say before we start?
No, when Louise is talking, if people could mute their mics though, but just unmute them when they want to speak, that would be great, because sometimes the background might interfere with Louise.
All right, well, we'll all mute now and we'll hand over. Louise, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here today to talk about Cheshire West and Chester's response to COVID-19. I didn't think when I was elected to be leader a year ago I'd be plunged into one of the biggest crises this country has faced probably since World War II. So it's been a steep learning curve for us all, but I'm delighted to be able to come here today and just update you with what we've been up to. So I thought I'd talk about our community response and how we've supported the community. Obviously, you'll be interested to hear about the business support. So I'll talk about that in terms of what we've done as a council, but also how we've worked with the LEP and other partners. I'll also update a little bit about adult social care, talk about contact tracing, and finally go into recovery. So the first slide that you've got there gives an overview of the community response that we basically had to get in place within about a week or so of going into lockdown. Because what was evident was that a lot of people would need our support, particularly the shielded groups. And if you remember, they're the people that were informed by government, by the NHS, that they needed to shield within their homes for 12 weeks. But we also knew that there were other vulnerable residents as well who would need support. So within our community response, all those little circles around the outside really pulls together all the things that we've been working on. So one of the things, we worked with Cheshire West Voluntary Action, and we did a shout out for volunteers, and we've been absolutely overwhelmed by the response of volunteers right across the borough. And currently we've got about just over 2,000 people who've signed up to be volunteers with the Community Fund initiatives. And Cheshire West Voluntary Action have worked with us and linked these volunteers into local community groups. We had to set up very, very quickly we've called it a COVID-19 distribution hub. And this was support that was for distributing food to our shielded residents, but also not just delivering food, but also giving other sorts of support. So that's now working 6 days a week. We've worked with Cheshire Fire and Rescue on this because we felt they were a trusted partner, and we've currently working, we've worked and delivered about 535 hours of support. So in Cheshire West and Chester, there's nearly 14,000 people on the shielded list. We've delivered about 1,000 emergency food parcels since March, and over 2,600 residents are getting food directly from DEFRA. So that's about 3,500 shielded people in Cheshire West that are needing support for food and other types of support. So we've got a surplus food facility, which is in the Cheshire Food Hub, and this is put in place to support food banks. So as well as the shielded group, there's other vulnerable groups of residents who've found themselves in need of food, whether it's because they've gone into financial hardship because of the impact of COVID, or because they're living alone and they're over 70 and feel particularly vulnerable. And so really the strategy here is to make sure that people have got enough food so that they can survive, basically. We've also set up a virtual support hub, which we have 30 full-time staff who have been redeployed to work on this, and we've dealt with nearly 4,000 cases on here. So this is somewhere people can phone in and ask for support. And some of you might have picked up some of the websites that we set up. So we've got Living Well website, which we direct people to with a full range of support that's out there from the community sector and from ourselves in terms of helping people. We also decided very early on that our community groups would probably need support because they're doing an amazing job out in the different localities. So we set up a community fund of 250,000, and we were really pleased that the Westminster Foundation matched that 250,000. So there's £500,000 now in a community fund for community initiatives, and we've spent about half of that for 60 different initiatives across the borough. And a lot of this has been quite sort of negative things. It's about protecting people and, you know, people that are scared and frightened. And we wanted to do something that would inspire and motivate people through the crisis. So we set up a website called Inspire Cheshire West. And this is filled with wonderful stories about how the community has supported each other. So if you haven't had a look at Inspire Cheshire West, just go and look at it, because the way that our residents have come together to support each other has been absolutely overwhelming. And, you know, there's examples of dog walking, of ringing people up to have chats. There's local shopping and food parcels. So there's just some really lovely things. You know, a little boy who is making cakes and taking them out to his community. So have a look at Inspire, because it is inspiring. It's brilliant. So that's the community side of it. And obviously we were worried about our businesses, and we knew that government was putting some initiatives in place. So once the announcement came of the business rate support, we wanted to make sure that we could get something in place quickly to get money out to those small businesses who would need that support. And if you remember, there were two schemes. There was scheme one, which was £10,000 relief, and scheme two, which was 25,000. And the 10,000 was aimed at small businesses and rural businesses, and the 25 was aimed at the retail, leisure and hospitality sector. So we got a team working on this 7 days a week, and we were encouraging people to go online and apply for this. And out of the money that we had, we knew there were about 6,000 businesses, and to date we've got about 90% of those businesses have now been paid, which amounts to about £55 million. It's interesting, actually, despite all the work we've done, there's still some businesses that haven't come forward to apply for this. So we're sort of looking, well, what is it that we need to do to try and get to those businesses? We've sent letters, we've contacted them, and so there's still some businesses that haven't applied for that. Our economic growth team has been supporting the business rates team, and to deal with any queries and point people in the direction of support and what other support might be available. So we've really sort of done it in tangent with those rather than just one or the other. They've worked together on it. You will have seen that there was a top-up discretionary fund that got announced, which is about £3.5 million. That was in May. And a paper went to Cabinet with a scheme that we approved in the middle of May. So we asked people to apply. The closing date for that was last week, and we'll get all the money out as soon as we can do. Apparently we've had about 256 applications for that. We've responded to 239 of those, and we've still got another 17 that we're working through. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to be really nimble and quick and agile in all of the work that we've been doing. And I suppose for the council, that's used to taking quite a long time sometimes to put processes and things in place, it's been really good to see that the quickness in the way that officers have reacted to the crisis. We've got a council business web platform called Let's Talk Business, and we're also through that now sending out weekly newsletters, and we've currently got about 342 businesses that have subscribed to that. So if you haven't gone on to Let's Talk Business, go and have a look at that. It's really interesting. It's got advice and guidance and support for people. And we're also looking at our work zones and how we can link those into job matching with local employers. So we've got an online job matching form that we've set up, which will help match people who are looking for work with those who are looking to recruit people, particularly now as we go out of lockdown. So there is, again, you can do that through the Let's Talk Business website. And particularly, I think we think there's going to be opportunities in retail as all of retail will be opening up on the 15th of June. If you can go on to the third slide, which is business support with the wider, that's it. Okay. So I sit on the local enterprise partnership, and we've been meeting on a regular basis since COVID-19, since we went into lockdown, and we've been working in small groups to come up with a plan really to help the wider sub-region as we go forward into recovery. But our council economic growth team has been working with a company called TMC, which is a strategic communications agency based in Cheshire. And they're working on coordinating messages between the council and the LEP and the Growth Hub, so that new and existing businesses can get that coordinated support. And I think some of you might have attended the session that we had at Alton Park last year, which had some keynote speakers and a Q&A session. So we're looking at doing a webinar type version of that, where businesses can come in and listen to some of the support that's available, but also do that Q&A. So keep a lookout for that. We'll try and get that up and running as soon as we can do. So we've also been working with the Chamber of Commerce to bolster support for Cheshire West businesses through the Startup Club, which is advice for new businesses. And Marketing Cheshire, excuse me, have been providing dedicated and targeted support for tourism and hospitality across Cheshire. Going back to the work of the LEP, there's been a number of webinars that they've been running as well. And they also had a Paving the Way Careers Festival, which some of you might have been involved in, between the 19th to 22nd of May. This was a virtual careers fair. And we had in that about 50 businesses delivering workshops, 77 schools and colleges took part, 22,000 people registered to attend, and 72,000 people visited the site. So it just shows you that using technology it's got some downsides, but it's really made us think in different ways, and perhaps getting to more people than we would have done if we'd done it the traditional way by holding a careers fair in one of the colleges. So the LEP, as I said, had some webinars between the 26th and 29th of May, and the new chair of the LEP was on Radio 5 apparently on Wake Up to Money on the 21st of May, which was really good. So all of this work that we're doing with businesses and that partnership approach, we want to continue, and I'd be interested when we come to the end of this to get some feedback from you in terms of how you'd like to get involved as we go into recovery. Can we go on to the next slide? I think it's adult social care. So obviously the human side of it is, and one that we need to think about, that's it, that's correct, is the impact that COVID has had on adult social care. And it's important to remember that people have lost their lives through this, and across the borough we've had about 290 people have died. So the work that we've done with our adult social care providers has been essential to try and reduce the impact of COVID. We've got about 90 care homes across the borough, And we also have domiciliary care and people that are being looked after in their homes and in supported living settings. So we very quickly set up a process right from the start where we could support our care homes, particularly ensuring they had sufficient protective equipment, the PPE that's been in focus quite a lot. And we work very closely with our NHS partners so that now nobody comes out of hospital that isn't tested. And I think a huge challenge for us has been trying to protect people within adult social care, both in terms of the residents, but also the staff. We have about 5,500 service users in care homes and in domiciliary care, and we have about the same number of staff as well. And I think what's come out of this is that as we go forward, we need to really enhance the role of adult social care. There was a lot in the beginning about the NHS and clapping for carers, which was fantastic and something that I supported. But actually, our adult social care, the healthcare workers were sort of the forgotten workers in our borough. So we've done as much as we can to support them. We have daily contact with them. We have PPE drops. We decided at the beginning we needed to buy our own PPE, and we've spent over £3 million so far in supporting and trying to keep those residents as safe as possible. And obviously it's not going to stop now. This is going to carry on. And when we come to talk about recovery, we need to think about the future of adult social care, and actually the model that we use as a community with adult social care, but I'll come back to that. And linked to this, and if we can go on to the next slide, is testing. I've felt very passionate that we needed to get testing brought to a local level. Our public health team are trained in outbreak and infection control, and you know, if we have an outbreak of TB or around sexual health or something in a school, it's our public health team that go in and put a wraparound support around there to contain any infections. So I've been very passionate that the testing and tracing regime for COVID is brought to a local level. So I was really pleased that we got identified as a beacon council. So we're now with 10 other councils across the country leading on working with the government on testing, tracing, tracking and isolating people. I have to say there's an awful long way to go before we're at the world-class system that Boris Johnson's been saying that we are. Currently, it's very much a centralised process. And we are pushing government to bring responsibility to a local level, so that if, for example, in Malpas there's an outbreak, we know exactly where that is and we can go and put the support in place to control that particular outbreak. So it's very early stage, it's very exciting, but there is we do have a big ask to government that they give us more responsibility at a local level. Because whilst we're waiting for the vaccine to come, this is the only way that we're going to be able to control it and keep that famous R level down low. At the moment, we don't even know what the R level is in Cheshire West. So that gives you an indication of what we're sort of battling to those powers that we need to get from government. So we know exactly what this enemy is that we're fighting and where it is within our communities. One thing we do know is that Merseyside and Manchester have got particularly high levels. I think Merseyside may well be traced back to the Madrid match that was in Liverpool. We border Merseyside with the Wirral, and it's quite likely that we have higher infection rates in the north and the west of the borough than we do maybe over towards Cheshire East on the other side. So it's exciting that we're getting involved in this, but there's a long way to go before it's effective. So if we could go on to the final slide, and then you can ask me questions, because I'm sure you've got a load to do. I think certainly when we got to about April, I started talking to the chief executive about, right, okay, this isn't going to last forever. The world's going to look very different when we come out of this. So what do we need to do to support people with evidence, residents and businesses within our borough towards recovery? So the cabinet and myself and senior officers have come up with the sort of strategy of a plan to come out of this, to get out of recovery, and we identified 7 pillars that we feel that we need to concentrate on. The first one is looking at how we re-establish public services, because you'll probably know we just had to shut everything. We got 2,500 staff to work from home. So how do we get our libraries open again? How do we start to work in a safe way so that we can help to open up our high streets, get our leisure centres open again? I think a press release went out today about the high street and the work that we're doing to try and get the high street open as we move forward. But how do we operate as a council now and get public sector up and running again? We also need to look at adult social care, and I mentioned that before, and make sure that this is fit for purpose, and it really sort of learns all the things that we've learned during this crisis. But also, do people want to go to a care home? Are more people wanting now to stay at home and get looked after in their own home? Because what the care home situation has shown us is that it's very precarious. It's full of very vulnerable people in one place, and infection can really just spread like wildfire once it goes in. So do people want their elderly relatives to be there, or are we going to work and look at a different way where perhaps people stay with their relatives or stay at home for longer? So we need to look at that as we move forward. We need to look at how we support children and families. We're thinking that with unemployment that's rising, a lot more people will be going into crisis. We've had an increase in the number of children that have been taken into care. So how do we look after and support our children and families? Really important, and something that I know you'll be keen to hear about, is how we support a resilient, inclusive and resurgent economy. So all the things that have happened during COVID-19, and there are a lot of negative things have happened, but there's an awful lot of opportunities that have come out of this. So how can we build on it? How can we work with businesses to make sure that our new look economy, whatever that is resilient? The work of the community has been fantastic, and we want to capture that. We've sort of scratched our head for years about how we can engage with the community, and then the community have all come together. They've engaged with us, and we want to keep that in terms of how we develop our plans moving forward. One of the things we've recognised is people haven't been attending screening, they haven't been going for tests, they haven't been going to see their GPs. So we think there's going to be public health crisis in the next year, with a rise in other diseases from people who have been too scared maybe to go to hospital. They've had appointments cancelled. So we want to think about how we can support that, but also be very mindful that we're likely to get a second wave of this, and how we're going to react and support that second wave of infections if and when it comes. And finally, we need to change the way we act as a council. We've all got used to now doing online meetings. Why do we need office space when maybe we could be working in a different way? So certainly there's going to be a lot of looking at ourselves and saying what's worked well out of this. And actually staff have enjoyed working from home. A lot of our particularly senior staff drive for hours a day up and down motorways to get into an office. Why are we making people do that, where they could perhaps have a much better work-life balance if they were working from home on a more regular basis? So that in a whistle-stop tour, and I've done 25 minutes, is what we've done over the last 2 months. So please, I'd welcome your questions, ideas. I'd really like to hear about your suggestions of about how you can work with us to help the recovery, and what your role you think is in that, and what I can do to take that forward.
Great. Well, thanks, Louise. I mean, let me first say thank you very much for a very erudite and comprehensive survey of what you're up to. And I'm delighted, and sure my colleagues are, to hear how much you are actually innovating and learning and looking forward, as you were, to us coming out of this. The one thing that I picked out, if I may, from what you said, was this contrast between local and national approaches to things. One of the things, and your chief executive, Andrew, will recall us from the time he and I worked together on the Northern Way, this recovery is vital. And it's how fast we come out of it that determines whether we widen or narrow that economic gap between us and other regions. And of course, principally, we think of the north-south gap. I'm a little bit worried myself that London seems to be making a case for that they are coming out of this pandemic earlier than the rest of the country. And it could be disastrous for our economy if we are told, okay, London and possibly the southeast can come out of it and get going faster than we can. That's something we do not want to see happen, quite frankly. And I'm a bit worried about Cheshire, which is, of course, one of the best performing economies outside London, being held back because of problems in Liverpool and Manchester. And I don't know how local can get in trying to come out of this.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, that. And I think part of the problem is nobody knows what infection rates there are anywhere. And yes, London does seem to be coming. They went into this quicker. So we're about 2 or 3 weeks behind London. So actually, when we all went into lockdown, they were in a much worse position than we were here. And I think it's probably because of the close proximity of the communities there and being a big city. So when I was saying that we're impacted by Liverpool and Manchester, that's because of the infection rates. So we know that in some parts of our borough, we have higher infection, well, we think we do, that have got higher infection rates than others. So I think we can move forward with the economy, but we just need to, what we don't want to do is to go into a second peak too soon, just as we're coming out of this. So we need, I think, to be really careful that we don't go out of this too quickly. And that's why we want to open up our high streets, and we're looking at innovative ways of how we can do a lot more around al fresco, about people being safe but coming into our cities in a safe way. But I think in terms of businesses, I feel really confident in Cheshire West. What we found is there's been lots of new innovations that have come forward. People have learned to adapt and to work in a different way. There's a lot around linked to the science corridor. Certainly with the Alderley Park, there's a lot of work going on there about innovations around technology. I've talked to people who are coming up with new agriculture methods. So I think you know, I'm not too pessimistic about that. I think Cheshire is in a really strong position to come out, and we've talked about whether it's a V-shaped recovery or a U-shaped recovery. Hopefully it's not going to be a flatlining one, but I'm feeling confident about Cheshire West. I really am. I mean, what does everybody else feel? You're all businessmen. How do you feel?
Who wants to come in? I fear somebody might be talking without their mic on.
Hi, Paul Taylor here from Taylor Estates. It's been interesting from our perspective on the property side. We've just started having new inquiries crop up again. So it seems to be, things seem to be picking up a bit there. The way we're actually going to be managing property in future seems to be drastically different as well, but at least in the short term, we'll see. How have you found, as far as Cheshire West developments, the town centre stuff, city centre stuff, things like that? Are they flexible now? You're looking at them in a different way from before, possibly, rather than blinkers on and going ahead? I assume it's worth taking a look at, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting that we were just about to sign the Northgate contract the week that we went into lockdown, so we had to sort of pause that, and it went through cabinet. We are going to be going ahead with that, but we're sort of tweaking our sort of longer term outlook with Northgate. I mean, the thing with this is nobody knows what the country is going to be like in 2 years' time, which is how long Northgate's going to go. But I think we felt it was really important that we showed confidence and we didn't just stop our regeneration scheme. So we're currently looking at Winsford as well, and the Ellesmere Port Hub is still going ahead. And it's that confidence in building and helping the economy moving forward, and showing that we believe in Cheshire West and we want to continue to work with businesses and develop. And I think that's the message. We need to be confident. At Cabinet, I talked about Roosevelt, and during the Great Depression, his 3 R's for the recovery in the States. So I think we need to be confident, all of us really, to get out of this. And it's being bold and brave, I suppose, as well. So, yeah, I think, yeah, we need to go ahead with Northgate.
Yeah.
Confidence is an issue that came up at a previous conversation we had, Louise. It's confidence that the public have, that they can, for example, go into Cheshire Oaks, and they are confident that Cheshire Oaks or M&S or whoever have actually got in place the right sort of processes and procedures to handle new customers going back to them safely.
Yeah.
Are you looking at that? So how can you give the public confidence?
Okay, so this is where the role of our public health team have come in. So we're actually working with Cheshire Oaks at the moment to help them with all their procedures that they need to put in place to make sure that it is safe. And we're working with businesses across the borough. So particularly around, I've talked about opening up our high street. So already some of the cafes are doing takeaways. So we are in both our public health and our enforcement teams will work with them to help them with the social distancing, which is going to be the main thing. One of the things we talked about at the LAP is maybe having some sort of link into public health so that businesses can find the most up-to-date information. I've suggested our Director of Public Health could do some webinars or things like that where businesses could ask questions. So we're there really to offer that guidance and support to help companies get up and running again. Does that help, Neville?
It does, but I'm thinking more of how can you persuade the public that they can have confidence that these businesses are actually doing the right things?
Yeah, that's well, obviously the businesses will have a role to play in convincing it, but there's a lot around the communications. What we've been really proud of, I think, is the way that Cheshire West as a borough has reacted, and everyone stayed at home. So I think they're listening to what people are saying. So we've got a small opportunity, I think, to get those messages out. So we put the press release out saying that our high streets are going to be safe. They're going to be open to business with details about what we're doing. So we need to just continue with that and work with businesses to help them on their communications as well. Yeah. But you're right, there's a lot of scared people. You know, people contact me every day and say they're worried about the number of people they're seeing out and about. And I have to say it's the majority rather than the minority that are feeling like that still. People are worried about their own safety. So we have to give out very reassuring messages, I think, to let people know that it is safe. You know, maybe encouraging people to wear masks, because obviously a mask can stop you giving germs to somebody. It doesn't protect you, but it can stop you transmitting germs. And I mean, I went to my local Sainsbury's on Saturday and everyone was standing very nicely in a snaky queue that went on for hundreds of yards, with 2 meters apart, and everyone was and Sainsbury's are really good, you know, they're only letting so many people in at a time. So I think we just have to, it's all the time about reassurance, reaffirming that it is safe and not going too fast too soon, which I think is what people are worried about. I am as well, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. And you are young. Anybody else got something they want to say? Anybody else?
David.
Who is it? Is it Nicholas?
Yeah, can I?
David, you go ahead.
Go on, David.
Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Okay, right, great. Louise, you started by saying you had 2,000 people who volunteered to help. Guess is that you haven't found for all those 2,000. How does a charity that is connect with those people who have offered their services?
So they need to go through Cheshire West Voluntary Action. So they're connecting organisations with the volunteers. So I think we've helped about 900 volunteers into places. So there are other people who volunteered, but if they go through Cheshire West Voluntary Action, Simon Sanford or Alistair Jeffs is there as well, and they can, Claire Harrison, they'll help link people up. It's like a dating agency.
This is a new service for the council.
Yes.
Nicholas, why did you come in? Nicholas?
Yeah, hi, Louise. I appreciate, like all of us, there's sort of limited resources and there's an awful lot to get on with at the moment. But I suppose what I was looking at is more sort of medium term. And from our perspective, from Grosvenor Estates, and looking at, I suppose, more Chester, it feels as though COVID has probably acted as a catalyst to probably accelerate a number of trends that we were already seeing beforehand. And I think one of the most pronounced ones is probably the high street and retail. And I just wondered, when time allows, whether there was going to be a sort of bit of a project on looking at what we could all collectively do to try and help retail on the high street. And Louise, if I may, while I got the mic, but very quickly on sort of the green environment, where there was some work being done in that area, because that again seems to have sort of accelerated and come to the fore really over the last few months, couple of months. Thanks.
Okay, so in terms of the involving businesses, that's going to be really essential going forward. We had a hackathon on Saturday about cycling and walking, which sort of links to the green agenda. But we do have a business cell, and I think part of our plans moving forward is to work with businesses around that. So if you want to get involved, that's why I'm here today. If you want to get involved in that recovery, then we can make that happen. So yeah, we do all need to work together on that. And I think going forward, the role in the high street of things like culture, heritage, arts, and all of that sort of thing, I think it is going to be important. What I've noticed from my own area in Neston is actually the local independents have really stepped up during the COVID crisis. They've been out delivering food, they've looked at different ways of working, they're very quick to open up again once we start coming out of easing. And I think that's a really good sign for independents, because they have got that agility to sort of flex. I think maybe the bigger ones that may suffer are some of the more traditional high street stores, and it'd just be interesting to see what happens about that. In terms of the green agenda, we've carried on. We've had our task force. I think, you know, we all will have seen that there's been no planes in the sky. There's been hardly any cars, and we've had lovely blue sunny days. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but I think it's how we can stop people, I think, going back into using the car as the first port of call for transport. And if we've got more people working from home, if we're currently looking at lots of people have been coming in and telling us about cycle routes. We've got £800,000 from the government to start looking at that alternative modes of transport. So there is if you look at our website under the climate emergency, you can see all the things that have been going on there. But there is a press release coming out this week about cycling, and the hackathon on Saturday came up with some themes and ideas and some branding around cycling and walking to really push the agenda. But I'm not going to give that away because it'll spoil it. It's a surprise.
Oh.
Sorry.
Dave Macy, did you want to come in? Dave Macy?
Yeah, no, I don't think I've got any comment or question at this time. Certainly for our business being sort of very technical, we made the transition rapidly and efficiently to working from home. And all of the teams have been doing that very successfully, very efficiently since lockdown. We are starting now to look at a transition back into office-based working. However, we're looking at a variety of schemes to help, and the confidence thing, even with our staff. A lot of our staff aren't feeling confident about going back into the workplace at the moment. So we are implementing quite a few measures. We're in a shared business facility, and the landlord has been superb in what they've implemented over the last few weeks to help facilitate the return to the workplace. But within our own actual office suite, we're implementing all of the social distancing measures and so on. But we're looking as well at flexibility. We're looking at sort of shift systems. People who may want to work in the evenings even, or the weekends. Obviously, we're still in a situation where we have some members of the team, they have childcare issues. We have people who are living at home with older relatives, so we have to be considerate to them. So we are looking at a new approach to working, which, being a technical company, an IT company, we can do so relatively easy. And it was very satisfying to see how we made the transition to home working with relative ease. So yeah, we're just slowly but surely, it's the confidence thing. We just want to re-engage with a small number of the team to come back into the office initially, and then just build that up. What we're finding is that some particular sort of functional areas, whilst they've been okay based at home, they will be more effective moving back into the office now. So yeah, it's the confidence, it's making sure that we do things absolutely correct, because what we don't want to do is for our staff to start coming back and then thinking, this isn't for me, I'm not up to it yet. And of course, those who are dependent upon public transport, would still encourage them to work from home as much as possible. If they want to come into the office, then by all means, come in at quieter times. But I'm going back to your point, Neville. I'm absolutely so keen for Cheshire to really get back on the map as soon as possible, especially more so than down south. And I think we're perfectly positioned to do so. There's so many wonderful businesses here, so much innovation, and I think we're all getting ready to embrace a new way forward, new opportunities, new beginnings.
Well, all power to your elbow, Louise, in getting us all back up and running again, and getting Cheshire operational and competing again with the rest of the world. Quickly, if anybody else has anything they want to raise, we've run over time. Thank you, Louise, for staying with us. But anybody else want to raise anything while we've got Louise here? Mark?
Just very quickly, if I can. Thank you very much, Louise. That's really interesting. Appreciate it. Mark Pilgrim, Chester Zoo. Just to say, feeling a little bit less confident than the rest of you, I think, this morning, having been told overnight that there's now a special instrument that's been put out at midnight, which means that legally we can't open the zoo. And we've been working really hard to put in lots of measures in place to make sure that we can, for example, manage numbers by booking online. We've got all of the COVID secure procedures in place around the zoo, lots and lots of things that we can do. And we feel that actually we can be part of the rebuilding process in terms of getting people out, engaging with nature, getting into that green space in a very controlled environment rather than the local park or wherever they may be, and want to be part of that. And we're now being told that actually we won't be reviewed until the 4th of July at the earliest, and there's no guarantees of that. So I have to say, kind of like, that potentially is disastrous for us, and any support we can have would be much appreciated. I'd like to talk to you about it.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I've got to catch up with the chief exec in about an hour or so, so I'll let him know that. I wasn't aware, so we don't get consulted on with these decisions. We just have to pick up the pieces when they're thrust at us. Can I just say, Dave, that what you were describing sounded like really good practice, and I think it might be quite good if we had examples of that good practice so that we could share with other businesses, because that approach you've taken sounds really useful, and I'm sure businesses will be struggling and in terms of thinking, you know, what can they do. So would you be happy to put yourself forward as an example of good practice?
I'd be delighted to do so, yes. You know, so by all means, contact me directly, or can send some information via Neville or Sharon. But yeah, I'm very keen on that, because I think it's vitally important. We have to put our staff first and foremost, and make sure we've undertaken a survey, for example, to every single team member, to really ask them to be completely open and let them share their thoughts about potential return to the workplace. So we've got a lot of invaluable information by doing that, so we can use that to position the return to the workplace in the best possible way. But we've got lots of good ideas, and we're starting to implement them. So, I'm more than happy to share them.
Excellent, thanks, Dave. Anything else quickly?
Sorry, Paul Taylor again. Just going back to Mark's point. That's astonishing. The sort of broad brush they've used in that respect. I think. Is there anything that we could do, Mark? Do CBL perhaps put a bit of information together, write a letter in? Do you want to?
Well, we've been working very closely with our DEFRA officials who've been talking to ministers, so and they're very supportive because they've seen all the measures we put in place, and we've even put in a system whereby, for example, there's no contact ticketing, so actually you just go in and it's automatic. So we've put lots of measures in place. We had EHO come and visit us recently, and they again sort of saw us as a measure of good practice. So I'd love to think that there was something we could do. Of course, I could open the shop on the 15th of June, but I can't open 130 acres of grounds, which I'm sorry, just seems completely ludicrous to me. But so not sure what you can do right now, but we're working very hard to try to have some sense in somewhere.
But it's another example of what Louise was saying earlier about national decisions made, whereas actually it might be more appropriate if we had a more local decision made, where conditions might be different from the ones that the national agency is looking at. And I am very, very worried that the national decisions are informed by what happens in London more than perhaps what happens here in Cheshire.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to write collectively to government about that. That might be something you want to think about doing, that more local decision making is made on all of those. Because certainly with the testing and tracing system, we could make those decisions. And it seems ludicrous that they can't open Chester Zoo, but millions of people are going to beaches and squashing in like sardines, uncontrolled.
We have later this week a session like this with Esther McVeigh, and I've already made a note. This is one of the issues we'd certainly raise with her, and her advice on how we might promote the concept of more local decisions as opposed to national decisions. This is a brilliant example. Any other points to raise very quickly? No? Well, thank you everybody for
being impressed by the.
Oh, go on, David. Is it David?
Sorry, something wrong with my internet. I just wanted to say that the local authorities in Cheshire have done a fantastic job, and